We're going to be considering the issue of stratification in this chapter. Stratification considers who has what resources and how the different classes are arranged in a hierarchy. We're going to be considering this on a global basis, contrasting different regions of the world and different countries and different classes within societies. We'll be considering policies too, particularly political means of maintaining wealth within certain classes. We'll also look at the concepts of colonialism and neocolonialism and how multinational corporations and technology maintain global stratification. When we speak about stratification, we're talking about the layers of society. I like to create an analogy to stratus clouds. Those are clouds that are formed by layers, and people grasp that picture fairly quickly. Society is arranged in social hierarchies, some people with more status and resources than others. The inequalities are systematic, meaning that they are embedded into society. There are different ways of creating and maintaining inequality. The most extreme form of stratification and inequality is slavery, where individuals own people as a form of property. Slavery has been in existence for all of human recorded history, and only recently has been challenged on a global basis as being immoral. We tend to think of slavery as an issue of racism, but the causes of slavery are much more varied. Most often people are put into slavery because of debt, crime, or war. When wars occurred, the winners killed the men, and that was to neutralize any kind of threat of reprisal. And then the winners sexually assaulted and enslaved the women. The conditions of slavery are varied as well. In some societies, slavery was temporary, and Roman slaves could buy their way out of slavery. Most often, slavery was a lifelong condition. Slaves often did not live long, as you can imagine the living conditions: lack of good housing and lack of medical care, exhausting work, and minimal nutrition took a toll on the body. Slave owners in the U.S. developed an ideology about the ownership of slaves. An ideology is a belief system that justifies social arrangements, making things that might be called into question appear just and fair. Slave owners claim that slaves were inferior, and some believe that slaves were less than fully human. Slavery was then perpetuated by making slaves inheritable, meaning that ownership could be passed along to descendants upon someone's death. Even after the Civil War ended slavery, the vestiges, those identifiers, the social stigmas, and the systematic disadvantages were kept alive for almost a century. In the South, segregation was not dismantled until Brown versus Board of Education in the 1950s, and then the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The right to vote for slaves was not effective until the Voting Rights Act of 1965, even though the 13th Amendment, forbidding slavery, was ratified back in 1865. South Africa also has a class-based system to separate the races. 4 groups, Europeans, Africans, coloreds, meaning mixed races, and Asians, were considered distinct groups. These classifications determined where people could live, work, and go to school. It determined where they could go for social events and who they could mix with socially. The system has been dismantled legally, but there's still a great deal of systemic oppression and discrimination for certain groups. Political violence has led to high crime rates and street violence. South Africa has a murder rate that's 6 times the rate of the U.S. The concept of a caste system refers to a social order where one is born into a certain class and must stay in that class regardless of one's achievement during their life. One must marry within their own group as well. India is an example of a caste system which has existed for 3,000 years. At the bottom of the caste system are the Dalits, who are considered the untouchables. Read the account that's in your text, also that's on the slide, regarding how this one untouchable man is segregated from the rest of society. India is trying to slowly dismantle the caste system and has affirmative action programs and is also increasing education and job availability for the lower class. The caste system is slowly giving way, being replaced by a system based more on material wealth. The estate system emerged during the Middle Ages in Europe. There were three groups, or what was known as estates: the nobility, the clergy, and the commoners. The nobility owned the lands, which was the main source of wealth. They lived to administer the lands, to collect taxes for the king, and to provide services to the king. Things like soldiers to defend the king's land and the king's title. The clergy represented the religious entities, which were also very powerful at that time. The clergy owned lands and collected taxes as well. The power of the king was dependent on the clergy, as the clergy had the ability to crown the king. The two classes had a certain amount of tension, as well as interdependence. Commoners were also referred to as serfs. Serfs belonged to the land, and if someone bought or inherited land, then the serfs would go with that land. In contrast to the caste system, class systems offer class mobility. You can move up and down in the social hierarchy. It's based much more on income, education, and prestige of occupation. The class system is flexible, at least in theory. In practicality, most people don't move out of the class system they were born into, but it is possible. All societies have some aspect of gender stratification. It doesn't matter whether a society is a caste, slavery-based, estate, or class-based. In every society in the world, men earn more money. Of the several 100 million people that cannot read, 2/3 of them are women. Gender is a significant category that impacts life opportunities. There is also what's known as the global superclass. Because we're all interconnected globally, wealth and power are more concentrated than ever before. The richest 1,000 people in the world have more wealth than the 2.5 billion poorest people on the planet. The majority of the superclass are male and white, unless they are the wives or the daughters of one of the male superclass. This figure illustrates the distribution of wealth on our planet.